So I got this from the no, not the dollar store, sorry, Goodwill. I just actually happened across it. It's a, what is this? A gallon 12-piece homebrew kit. Not quite sure what kind of beer it makes. It makes 1 gallon of cold. Oh, it's a blonde ale that's included in this one. So let's have a quick look inside. Let's see if everything's there that's supposed to be. So we got, this is a sanitizer. Oh, it comes with a sanitizer, huh? Well, that's nice. All right, so we've got our lid and a valve. Oh, okay, that's for filling. And our airlock. Okay, that's good. Looks like, oh, there's a thermometer there. And our gas tube to let the concoction breathe. That's nice. Rather moth-eaten piece of packaging. Some tubing, rubber tubing. Well, that'll come in handy later. The actual 1 gallon brewing jar, or fermenting jar, I guess. So we'll need that for that. Okay, that can stay on the floor for a moment. Nothing else down there. And then in here, we've got nothing else in the box there. Put the box to the side. All right, and then in here we've got, this is still sealed. It's got breathing holes, so that's fine. But in here it looks like we've got, so this is our malt, or our grains are in here. And then we've got a packet of yeast. And then a packet of hops by the look of it. This should be the hops, right? Yes, BSG hops. Battlestar Galactica. Okay. All right, so we've got some hops in there. So, we've got everything we need in this kit here, except the water, the funnel, the pan for, or the pot for brewing, and all the rest of that. Okay, so here's what I've got. So, the first thing is we need a gallon, or 4 quarts if you will, of 160 degree water that we are going to put the grains into. When you add the grains, they're going to drop the temperature of the water. So 160 is fine. You don't really want it any hotter than that because it'll start pulling out unwanted flavors from the grains. So after that, we want to keep the water at 154. While we add the grains, we want to kind of spread them around on top of the water and make sure that we don't get any like balls of grains or dough or whatever. And then we want to let that sit for about an hour at around 154 degrees. This pulls the sugars and the flavors out of the grains. We don't want it to get too much hotter than 154 because, as I said before, it's going to start pulling out unwanted flavors. After that, we want to go ahead and strain this concoction. Cheesecloth is your best bet because it's going to catch a lot of the stuff that you want. It's not going to let too much through, and it's easy to clean afterwards. I may try a metal strainer, like one of those fine ones you use for baking, but I don't know how well that's going to go. I'll try that on my Octberfest, I guess. Once you've got it strained, you want to do something called sparging. Now this is where you take 170 degree water and use it just to rinse the grains. You're going to use about, 5 quarts, and that's going to be what you are going to reduce. So after sparging, we are going to take that water and we are going to add the hops and bring it up to a boil. And we're going to keep it on a nice controlled boil for about an hour. So once we've boiled it for an hour, we want to let it cool off. And we want to try and cool it as quick as we can, if possible, because we don't want any nasty bacteria getting in there and spoiling our beverage. I recommend a tight fitting lid and putting it into a tub of cold water or ice water if you can, just to try and get it to cool down as quickly as possible. Once we've got it nice and cool, we can move on to the next step. Once it's cooled down to a reasonable temperature where you can handle it, I would dispense it into your fermenting jar carefully and cover it with some, just cover the top with some aluminum foil, and just let it cool off. Once it gets down to a reasonable temperature, we can move on to adding the yeast. When we add the yeast, we want to do it quickly, and we want to try and get the yeast in the water as well, because we don't want to let any nasty bacteria in there. We just want to keep our yeast in there and keep our yeast alive. So let's get our yeast in there. We'll give it a little bit of a slosh around just to get all the yeast into the liquid, and then we put our airlock on there. Once we've got our airlock on there, we can move this into a nice dark place and let it sit for 2 weeks. I recommend putting this on some kind of a cookie sheet or a baking sheet or something, because if the yeast gets a little too active, you do run the risk of some fermentation coming over the top and bursting out and running down the sides of the jar, and you don't want that like soaking into carpet or anyway you don't want. So a little cookie sheet just to catch any overflow is a really good idea. So we got our temperature up to 161. We got our little probe in there. We've been very careful to keep it under 170. It's going up a little bit. So I'm going to adjust the stove ever so slightly. We'll give the water a quick stir. So let's go ahead and we'll add our malt to this mixture. So there's our malt bag there. Lovely, lovely. All right, I just snipped the corner off. And what we're going to do is add a little bit at a time and try and spread it out, because what we don't want it to do is form clumps. We want it all just to kind of go in there, and you don't want clumps of this stuff in there. So we're going to get it in, make sure that our temperature comes back up, or stays at around 154. And just give this a little stir every now and again. There we go. So that's the end of our packet. We'll get rid of that. I'm going to crank the temperature a little bit, because adding this has reduced the temperature in the pot. So we're just going to give this a quick stir. Make sure there are no balls happening. Make sure nothing's clumping together. Get our probe back into the water. Make sure the probe is fully submerged so we're getting an accurate reading. Now I'm going to make sure that this does not go above 160 for too long. All right, the time is up. My spurging or rinsing water is at a nice 170. We got that smells good. Have my cheesecloth and my pot ready. Let's do this thing. Now we just pour the grains through the cheesecloth. Like this. There we go. All the grains need to come out. There we go. You don't have to make that noise if you don't want to, but I have a 9-month-old, so it's starting to become a habit. Okay. And I should be able to put 5 quarts into this. 5 quarts. 5 quarts into this container here. Actually, what I might do is put it into the other container, because that's going to need washing as well. And then mix the two. Because I don't know if that pot's going to hold it all. So what we're going to do is just switcheroo a little bit. So I'm just going to use this guy here so I know how much I'm putting in. And that noise you can hear in the background is my 9-month-old moving around. So we're just going to, basically we're just rinsing off the grains with some hot water. We're shocking them, really, with some very hot water. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to be clever about this. So now I know that the water is touching the bottom of the colander here. I'm going to switch out and use the other pot like I should have done in the first place. Okay, so now we have a problem. This pot is basically full. This pot, not quite so much. So I think what I'm going to have to do is A, order a bigger pot on Amazon, B, split this between the two pots and then split the hops, or divide the hops evenly between the two and just boil the wort in both pots at the same time. Because obviously what's going to happen is the liquid is going to reduce down. So that's fine, but I'm just going to have to suck it up and use two pots, I guess. All right, while those two pots come to the boil, let's take a look at the hops packet here. In my extremely expensive lid. So there's our hops. These are hop pellets. These are actually what they use in industrial beer making around the world. And it's got such a nice smell to it. So what I want to do is take out about that much there and put that off to the side for later. Okay, so I'm just going to seal that back up again. So I want to use those later. And then the rest of this I'm going to divide equally between the two pots. So that's going to be interesting. All right, well, let's do this. It's about half there and half there. There we go. All right, so that'll work. So we'll divide those between the two pots. All right, we got some boiling action going on. These actually seem to boil at a pretty good temperature. I'm going to take this down to 6 on my old stove here, and let's go ahead. We'll put our hops into that one there, and then we'll put our hops into that one there, and I'm just gonna just evenly distribute the powder. Look at that. Look. There we go. All right, now we just got to get these to continue to boil like this for an hour. Timer. Let's start, and away we go. So I'll see you in an hour. All right, so it's been about 30 minutes. I've managed to transfer all the liquid into the one pot, and we've got a nice boil going. So we can see it is reducing, so we'll give it another 30 minutes, and we'll be done with this bit. All right, it's been an hour. So I'm going to turn the heat off. Remember the hops that we saved from earlier in here? I just used the back of the wooden spoon and smashed them just to break them up. So now we've got this done. I'm just going to actually just take this off the heat a little bit like this. Oh, Munchkin's not happy that I turned the TV off. So we've got to do this quickly. We've got to do this quickly anyway. I can't get the packet open. It's great. All right, there we go. There we go. All right, so we've got the packet open. I'm going to add the hops, uncover it, take it off the heat, and let it cool. Okay, so what we've got now is we've got our pot with its lid and it's cooling off. We've got to get this cooled off down to room temperature so we can get the yeast in, because if we put the yeast in when it's hot, the yeast will just die because they have to be within a certain temperature range. We also want to get it down as quickly as possible, because the longer we take in this kind of, in this vessel with the open air and everything, the more chance there is of those sneaky little bacteria from getting into our brew. While it's still really hot, once they get in there, when they get in there, they'll die, just like the yeast. But once it gets down to a reasonable temperature, that's where we get into that danger zone. And any mistakes with like the lid or exposing it to the air for too long or anything like that, that could potentially bring disaster to your brew. So the tip is to get this cooled down to room temperature as quickly as you can so you can put it into your fermentation jar, and which will be a nice secure environment. Okay, so it's been a couple of hours, so let's go ahead. We are going to, so this has already got the liquid in it. I've cleaned this out. This has been sanitized. Let's grab our funnel. All right, so we'll put this in here. We're going to take our wort. And we are going to very carefully pour this into our jug. It still feels quite warm, actually. Got some head going on there, huh? All right, it's good. Okay. So that looks good to me. So what I'm going to do now is just take its temperature with my handy dandy probe. Because we want to make sure that it's not going to be too hot to add the yeast. So that can go over here. '86. It's a little warm. Now, if we take a look in the pan, this little swell. See that stuff there is what you kind of want to try and avoid getting into your jar. A little bit is okay because the yeast will eat it, but too much and you're gonna spoil your brew. So it's not terrible that I still have some left. Okay. Last bit. So what I'm going to do now, this is nice and cool. I'm going to very carefully remove the lid here. Anyway, so now we got this. I just spent 10 minutes cleaning the kitchen up after doing all of this. It would appear that I put my scissors away because I'm that organized. So we're just going to open this up here. So this is our yeast packet that comes in the kit. Yep, smells like yeast. So we are just going to dump it in. Make sure we get all of it in there. Okay. We're going to put the lid up. No, we're not. We're not going to put the lid on just yet. We are just going to give this a little bit of a swish around here, get the yeast in there. There we go. All right. Now you can see the yeast in there. The yeast is going to go in. It's going to start eating at the sugars and producing carbon dioxide. It'll sink to the bottom, and it's going to do our thing. So now what we're going to do is put the lid on. So the only thing left to do now is to take this and put it somewhere dark for 2 weeks. Dark and relatively warm. We want it to stay at a reasonable temperature so the yeast can do its job. We don't want it too cold and we don't want it too warm. And we certainly don't want to put it in the garage in Florida because that will just kill the yeast and you'll end up with funny flavored water. So I've got it in this tin here in case the yeast get a little too carried away and I get a overflow. This should catch most of the nonsense. All right, so day 2. Let's check the process. I'm going to very quickly have a look here. Oh wow, look at that. It's doing nicely. You can see that the topper has moved. There's bubbles coming out. And if we look really closely, we can see the carbon dioxide rising as the yeast does its job. So that's day 2. We got several more days to go. Well, that's all of that done. The bottling was okay. I just siphoned it from the jar into the bottles using that plastic pipe that was included. That was that. So what did we learn? Well, I learned that I need a bigger boiler pot. So I ordered a 3-gallon boiler from Amazon. So I should be able to do at least comfortably do a gallon bottles from now on. We also learned that the cheesecloth was another one. I'm thinking that 8 layers was probably a little excessive. 3 layers is probably going to be the sweet spot, just to catch all the gunge and let the liquid through. A hydrometer was something else that I had neglected to include in my shopping list. So I ordered one of those from Amazon as well. So next time, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to set up another camera so we can flick backwards and forwards, and I'm going to do the Octberfest that I have sitting right next to me here. So join me for that. It should be in like 2 or 3 weeks, I hope. So that's that. Thanks for joining me. It's much appreciated. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are into this kind of nonsense. If you have any tips for beginner brewers, go ahead and feel free to leave them in the comments below. They're always appreciated. Thanks.